Unforgettable afternoon. Royal Guard's incredible horsemanship shocks protesters. The streets around the royal palace were unusually busy, buzzing with activity, yet there was an underlying tension that made the air feel electric. People were moving quickly, some in groups, others alone, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and concern. For the citizens who had lived near the palace for years, this was not an ordinary day. Today, a group of protesters had gathered, determined to make their voices heard about matters they felt the authorities had ignored for far too long. The crowd was diverse. Young students with banners and placards shouted slogans passionately, while older citizens stood quietly, holding signs with careful handwriting, their faces etched with concern. Parents tried to keep their children close, whispering reassurances that everything would be fine. Even tourists who had come to see the palace's historic architecture were drawn to the commotion. Cameras clicked from every angle, phones recorded videos, and drones hovered above, capturing the unfolding scene from the sky. The energy of the crowd was tangible, a living, breathing wave of people unified by a single purpose: to be heard. Not far from the crowd, the royal guards were preparing themselves, their expressions calm and serious. Unlike the noisy, restless protesters, the guards were disciplined and composed. They moved with precision, their polished boots clicking against the cobblestone streets, their uniforms spotless, each detail carefully in place. The royal guards were trained for situations like this, but every day brought a new challenge, a new set of eyes watching, a new possibility that could test their skill. Among them stood Sergeant Thomas Hale, a man known not only for his service, but for a skill that few others possessed: extraordinary horsemanship. Thomas Hale had been with the Royal Guards for over 15 years. His reputation was built on a combination of patience, strength, and a deep understanding of horses. To him, Silver, his trusted steed, was not just an animal but a partner. Every movement, every command was a conversation, silent but precise. Over the years, they had faced numerous difficult situations together, from crowd control during large celebrations to navigating dangerous streets during unexpected emergencies. Today, however, felt different. There was something about the crowd, about the way tension seemed to hum in the air, that made him focus more intently than usual. As Hale adjusted the straps of Silver's saddle and checked the reins, he observed the protesters from a distance. Some were shouting angrily, waving their banners high, while others murmured quietly amongst themselves. The messages they carried were varied, but all shared one theme: frustration with a system that seemed indifferent to their concerns. Despite the chaos that might erupt at any moment, Hale remained calm. He knew that his job was not to fight but to protect, to maintain order without escalating violence. He breathed deeply, feeling the rise and fall of Silver's chest beneath him, finding reassurance in the steady rhythm of the horse he had trained so carefully. The palace walls, tall and formidable, towered above the crowd, their stones warm under the afternoon sun. Guards lined the perimeter, their eyes scanning every movement. Behind them, the palace gates stood closed, a symbol of security and tradition. Yet even the most secure walls could not contain the unrest that simmered outside. Some protesters were restless, moving closer to the barriers, trying to make their presence known. Others shouted, demanding attention. Cameras caught every gesture, every shout, and in return, the crowd seemed to grow louder, feeding off the energy of their own voices. Hale could feel the subtle shift in the air, the way a wave of emotion passed through the crowd. It was the kind of feeling that told him something was about to happen, a moment that could turn ordinary tensions into extraordinary challenges. He shifted slightly in his saddle, feeling Silver respond instantly, a gentle nudge of understanding. The horse's ears twitched, sensing the crowd's energy, its body tense yet ready. Hale's mind was already planning possible actions, rehearsing maneuvers that could help keep everyone safe. Years of training had taught him that preparation and observation were as important as action. Nearby, other guards were also taking in the scene, their faces calm, their movements precise. Some adjusted their helmets, while others communicated quietly through hand signals, ensuring that every position was covered. The royal guards had a code of conduct, a silent agreement that they would maintain peace with dignity. Yet today, dignity would need to meet courage. Today, every decision could have consequences that would be felt long after the sun set. Hale watched as a young protester handed out leaflets, explaining their cause to passers-by. Some people took them politely, while others walked past without a word. Every gesture, every movement, added to the mosaic of human emotion that filled the plaza. As the crowd swelled, the noise increased. Chants mixed with laughter, some nervous, some defiant. Parents held children above the heads of the crowd so they could see, while journalists edged closer, trying to capture the perfect angle. Hale noticed the diversity of the people present. Students, workers, parents, tourists, and even a few retired officers observing the scene. It struck him that today was a moment when many different lives intersected, each person bringing their own story, their own reason for being here. The mixture of hope, fear, anger, and determination created a unique tension that was almost palpable. In the midst of this, Hale remained a figure of calm authority. His experience told him that the crowd was not inherently dangerous. It was the energy that could become unpredictable if not managed properly. He adjusted Silver's reins, feeling the horse shift beneath him in anticipation. The connection between rider and horse was almost invisible to the casual observer, yet it was critical. Silver trusted Hale completely, responding to the slightest pressure of the leg, the smallest tilt of the body, the gentlest touch of the hand. Together, they were ready, a silent partnership prepared to navigate whatever challenges lay ahead. Time seemed to slow as the afternoon continued. The crowd's noise became a rhythmic pulse, rising and falling like waves in a storm. Every person seemed to have a story, every chant a meaning, every sign a purpose. Yet Hale's attention was not on the individual stories, but on the larger picture, on maintaining safety and preventing escalation. He could see the subtle signs that some protesters were growing impatient, edging closer to the barriers. Others were attempting to get attention from officials inside the palace, waving signs and shouting their messages. The energy was building, and Hale knew that the moment of action could come at any time. As the sun reached its peak, casting long shadows across the plaza, Hale reflected on his journey. He had trained for moments like this, yet every situation was unique. His mind moved through strategies, imagining possible scenarios, visualizing how Silver could move through the crowd with grace and precision. He felt a mixture of responsibility and resolve. This was more than just a duty, it was a chance to show what true mastery of horsemanship could achieve, a way to turn potential chaos into an organized, safe outcome. The crowd continued to chant, their voices carrying through the streets. Some were calling for change, others simply shouting to be heard. Cameras continued to click, and the energy of the city seemed to pulse with anticipation. Hale felt a sense of calm determination. He knew that soon, the moment would arrive when observation would turn into action, and preparation would meet reality. Every second of waiting was a test of patience, every glance a calculation of movement, every breath a moment of connection with Silver. The afternoon was alive with possibility, a mixture of tension and expectation. For the people in the crowd, it was a day to be remembered. For Hale and the Royal Guards, it was a day to demonstrate discipline, skill, and courage. And above it all, Silver stood patiently, ready to respond at a moment's notice. The scene was set for an unforgettable event, a moment that would later be recounted again and again, not just for the chaos that threatened, but for the incredible display of horsemanship and calm authority that was about to unfold as the afternoon stretched on. The energy in the plaza began to shift. What had started as a passionate but relatively calm gathering of protesters was slowly turning into something more charged. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm light over the crowd, but it did little to calm the growing excitement and tension. Some of the younger protesters were starting to move closer to the palace gates, their voices rising in unison, their chants becoming louder and more insistent. They waved banners high, the colors bright against the pale stone of the palace walls, trying to make sure their messages were seen. Sergeant Thomas Hale observed the scene carefully from atop Silver, his chestnut horse that moved with quiet strength beneath him. Hale could sense the growing impatience in the crowd. It was subtle at first, shifts in weight, nervous glances, raised voices, but to him it was unmistakable. He knew that if even a small spark ignited, it could escalate into something much bigger. Hale's years of experience taught him that crowds were unpredictable, and that even a seemingly peaceful demonstration could become chaotic in an instant. He adjusted Silver's stance slightly, keeping the horse ready for any movement that might be required. The protesters were diverse, and so were their emotions. Some shouted in anger, waving their fists in the air, their faces red from the effort. Others seemed nervous, unsure of what might happen next, their eyes darting between the guards and the palace gates. Parents held their children tightly, whispering calming words, while journalists and bystanders moved cautiously through the crowd, trying to capture the unfolding scene without interfering. The air was thick with anticipation, a mixture of hope, frustration, and excitement that could be felt in every corner of the plaza. Nearby, the royal guards moved with silent efficiency. They were stationed strategically, maintaining a visible barrier between the palace and the crowd. Each guard knew their role, each step carefully measured, each gesture precise. Unlike the noisy, restless crowd, the guards' presence was steady, calm, and disciplined. They communicated without words, using subtle hand signals and glances to coordinate their positions. Hale observed them, noting their readiness, and felt a quiet reassurance. They were trained to handle this, to prevent escalation, and to protect everyone in the area. Despite the growing tension, there was an unspoken agreement between the protesters and the guards. No one wanted violence. The protesters wanted to be heard, and the guards wanted to maintain order without using unnecessary force. It was a delicate balance, one that required patience, skill, and above all, respect for the people and the rules. Hale had faced many challenging situations before, but something about this gathering felt different. The crowd's energy was not just strong, it was focused. Their determination was clear, and Hale knew that he had to be equally focused to keep the situation under control. As the crowd pressed closer to the barriers, Hale noticed a small group of individuals who seemed more determined than the rest. They were moving with purpose, trying to get the attention of the palace officials. Their voices were louder, their gestures more forceful, and their determination clear. Hale understood that this was a critical moment. He needed to ensure that their actions did not provoke panic or danger for the safety of everyone present. He shifted slightly in his saddle, feeling Silver respond instantly. The horse was alert, ears forward, muscles tense but controlled, ready to respond to Hale's slightest command. Hale's mind worked quickly, analyzing the situation and planning his possible responses. He considered multiple scenarios, thinking through each possible outcome. He knew that if the crowd became unruly, the consequences could be serious. But he also knew that his role was not to intimidate or scare the protesters. It was to guide, protect, and maintain order. Every movement had to be measured, precise, and purposeful. Hale trusted Silver completely, and he knew that together they could handle whatever might come. The sun continued to shine, casting long shadows across the plaza, and the noise of the crowd grew louder. The chants became rhythmic, almost musical in their repetition, yet underlying them was a sense of urgency. Some protesters tried to move past the barriers, while others gestured toward the palace gates, demanding attention. Cameras continued to capture every detail, and onlookers whispered among themselves, speculating about what might happen next. Hale could feel the tension in the air, a tightrope stretched between order and chaos, and he knew that the next few minutes would be crucial. Suddenly, a commotion broke out on the edge of the crowd. A small group of protesters began arguing with one another, their voices rising above the general noise. The argument quickly drew attention, and others started to gather around, their curiosity turning into excitement. Hale observed carefully, understanding that small conflicts within the crowd could quickly escalate if not managed properly. He shifted his weight slightly in the saddle, signaling Silver to move closer, not to intimidate, but to provide a visible presence of calm authority. Silver moved gracefully, each step controlled and deliberate, as if sensing the importance of the moment. Hale's eyes scanned the crowd, noting the positions of every protester and every guard. He understood that maintaining balance in the plaza was not just about stopping potential danger. It was about guiding the crowd, showing presence, and preventing panic. The horse's hooves made a soft, rhythmic sound on the cobblestones, a subtle reminder of the order and discipline standing in the midst of growing tension. The young protesters at the front of the crowd were growing bolder. Some tried to move closer to the palace gates, while others shouted their messages louder, hoping someone inside would hear them. Hale recognized the signs of impatience, the kind that could lead to reckless actions. He adjusted his position, bringing Silver slightly forward, a silent signal that the guards were present, attentive, and ready. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the rising energy of the crowd, creating a visible anchor in the middle of the unrest. Nearby, other guards were also positioning themselves strategically, ensuring that no one could slip through unnoticed. They moved silently, their eyes sharp, scanning every gesture, every step, and every shift in the crowd's mood. Hale felt a sense of reassurance knowing that his team was prepared, but he remained alert. In situations like this, even a moment of distraction could lead to consequences. He focused on Silver, feeling the subtle tension in the horse's body, the way it responded to his thoughts and movements. Together, they were ready for any situation, prepared to act swiftly and decisively if needed. As minutes passed, the energy in the plaza continued to build. Chants became more coordinated, slogans repeated with rhythm, banners waving high, colors dancing in the sunlight. Children pointed excitedly at the scene, parents whispered reassurances, and journalists edged closer to capture every moment. Hale felt the pulse of the crowd like a living organism, every movement feeding into the next, creating a wave of emotion that could either surge forward harmlessly or spill over into chaos. His role was to ensure it stayed the former. The young group that had been pushing closer to the palace gates began to become more assertive. They moved as one, trying to catch the attention of the officials, waving their banners high. Hale understood that this was the moment that could define the afternoon. Every step, every gesture, every decision mattered. He adjusted Silver slightly, leaning forward just enough to signal presence without aggression. The horse responded instantly, shifting its weight, muscles taut but controlled, ready to move in any direction. Hale's thoughts were focused yet calm. He knew that the protesters were not there to harm anyone, they were there to be heard. The challenge was to guide the situation in a way that kept everyone safe while respecting their right to express themselves. He observed, planned, and waited for the right moment, understanding that patience was as important as action. Every guard around him was equally vigilant, their discipline a testament to years of training and experience. The afternoon wore on, and the sun began to cast longer shadows across the plaza. The crowd's energy remained high, yet the presence of the royal guards, and especially Hale on Silver, created a sense of order amidst the chaos. The protesters continued to shout, to wave their signs, and to push for attention, but they did so within the visible boundaries set by the guards. Hale's eyes scanned the plaza constantly, noting every movement, anticipating every possible outcome, ready to act if the situation demanded it. Then, as if sensing the shift in the crowd's mood, Hale felt a subtle change in Silver's stance. The horse's ears twitched, muscles tensed slightly, and Hale knew that something was about to happen. The energy of the crowd was reaching a point where a small action could set off a chain reaction. Hale's mind moved rapidly, considering the safest and most effective way to handle whatever came next. He had trained for moments like this, yet every situation was unique. He trusted Silver completely, knowing that together they could manage whatever challenge was about to unfold. The crowd continued to chant, the energy rising, the banners waving, and the voices calling out with determination. Hale felt the weight of responsibility, the importance of his role, and the necessity of calm, precise action. He shifted slightly in the saddle, adjusting Silver's stance, and prepared himself for the moment that could change the entire afternoon. The tension in the air was almost tangible, a tightrope stretched between order and chaos, and Hale knew that how he and Silver responded would determine the outcome. The tension that had been quietly building all afternoon suddenly snapped like a stretched rope. A small group of protesters at the front, more impatient than the rest, surged forward, trying to break through the barriers. Their voices rang louder than before, and their gestures became urgent. The crowd behind them reacted instantly, their energy multiplying, creating a wave of movement that could easily get out of control. From the vantage point atop Silver, Sergeant Thomas Hale could see the situation developing like a storm. Every instinct in his years of experience told him that this was the moment to act, but he knew that force alone would only make things worse. Hale's eyes scanned the crowd, calculating the safest and most effective way to manage the surge. His hands tightened slightly on Silver's reins, not to pull back, but to prepare for precise, controlled guidance. He could feel Silver's muscles shifting under him, taut with readiness, responding to his every thought before he even acted. The horse had been trained for moments like this, and Hale trusted Silver completely. Together, they were a single unit, capable of moving through the chaos with calm, deliberate control. The protesters at the front pressed forward, their banners waving, voices shouting, and fists raised. Some were young students, filled with passion and energy, while others were older citizens, frustrated and desperate to be heard. The surge was strong enough that the barriers shook slightly under the pressure. Hale knew that if he hesitated, even for a moment, someone could get hurt. He shifted his weight, signaling Silver to step forward. The horse moved smoothly, deliberately, positioning itself between the pushing group and the barrier, a living, breathing shield. Silver's presence alone had an immediate effect. Some protesters instinctively stepped back, startled by the calm authority radiating from the horse and its rider. Hale's voice rang out, firm but controlled, commanding attention without yelling. "Please step back. Everyone stays safe," he said. The sound carried over the crowd, cutting through the shouting like a knife. It was not fear that compelled them, but respect. Hale and Silver moved with precision, guiding the crowd, separating individuals whose energy was threatening to tip into chaos, and creating space where there had been none. The surge continued, and the challenge grew. A few protesters pushed harder, their determination evident in every step. Hale leaned slightly, signaling Silver to turn, guiding the horse in a gentle but unmistakable arc. With an almost effortless motion, Silver weaved between the forward-moving individuals, maintaining calm control while ensuring that no one was harmed. Each movement was perfectly calculated, balancing authority with safety. Onlookers held their breath, astonished at the seamless coordination between man and horse, a display that was as much art as it was action. The scene was breathtaking. Hale moved like a conductor leading an orchestra, each gesture precise, each step deliberate. Silver responded instantly, stepping sideways, pivoting, and advancing at just the right speed to create order without fear. The surging protesters were guided back gently, their energy redirected rather than punished. Those who were watching couldn't believe what they were seeing. A single rider on a horse managing a crowd that could easily have descended into chaos. Cameras flashed, recording every movement, capturing the calm amidst the storm. Despite the apparent ease with which Hale and Silver moved, the situation was intense. One wrong move, one sudden jolt from the crowd, and everything could unravel. Hale's mind remained focused, analyzing every gesture, anticipating every reaction. He noticed a young protester stepping too close to a fellow demonstrator, almost losing balance. Hale signaled Silver to move closer, and the horse adjusted instantly, guiding the young protester safely back into position without touching anyone. It was a subtle movement, almost invisible to casual observers, yet it prevented a potential accident before it even happened. The energy of the crowd began to shift. Some protesters, impressed by the precision and calm authority displayed by Hale and Silver, slowed their advance. They looked on with surprise and admiration, recognizing that they were not being threatened, but guided. The chants grew quieter, the pushing less forceful, and the tension in the plaza began to ease. Hale knew that this was the moment to reinforce control without aggression. He leaned slightly, urging Silver forward with a controlled, gentle pressure, creating a moving barrier that separated the more assertive individuals from the rest of the crowd. Hale's movements were a combination of years of training, deep knowledge of horses, and an innate understanding of human behavior. He could read the crowd like a book, anticipating actions before they happened. Each gesture from Silver was deliberate, precise, and effective. The horse moved with grace, weaving between the protesters, guiding them with subtle pressure from Hale's legs and reins. The combination of discipline, skill, and calm authority transformed a potentially dangerous situation into one that remained under control. A journalist near the edge of the plaza whispered to a colleague, "Look at that. He's not just controlling the horse, he's controlling the energy of the crowd itself." Indeed, the scene was extraordinary. It was not about power or intimidation. It was about skill, patience, and the quiet command of presence. Hale and Silver were the calm center in a sea of rising emotion, demonstrating that courage and mastery could achieve what shouting and force could not. The protesters continued to react. Some moved back entirely, stepping away from the front line, while others hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Hale guided Silver slowly, carefully, ensuring that space was created between the groups, that order returned to the front lines. He never raised his voice aggressively, never made a sudden movement that could startle the horse or the crowd. Every action was calculated, every motion precise, a perfect example of trained horsemanship applied to a real-world challenge. At one point, a particularly determined protester tried to push forward again, breaking slightly through the barrier. Hale responded immediately, leaning slightly to signal Silver to pivot, creating a gentle but firm barrier with the horse's presence. The protester stopped, surprised, realizing that the force was not aggression but guidance. Slowly, the individual stepped back, joining others who had already retreated. The crowd began to sense the pattern, understanding that they could express their energy without danger. The atmosphere started to calm, though vigilance remained essential. Hale's control extended beyond physical movements. His calm demeanor, his firm but respectful voice, and the connection he shared with Silver all worked together to influence the crowd. People began to recognize that the situation could be managed without fear, that the presence of the Royal Guard was not a threat but a reassurance. Parents relaxed slightly, journalists leaned forward with curiosity rather than caution, and even some of the younger protesters began to mimic the rhythm of calm authority rather than chaos. The turning point had arrived. The energy of the crowd, once surging and potentially dangerous, was now being guided, controlled, and redirected. Hale moved Silver in gentle circles, weaving through the front lines, creating order from movement. The precision was astonishing. Even the most restless protesters found themselves influenced by the horse's presence, stepping back when guided, following the flow without realizing it. The coordination between rider and horse had transformed the plaza, turning what could have been a scene of panic into one of managed energy. Throughout the plaza, cameras continued to record. Social media users would later describe the scene as incredible and unbelievable. Yet for Hale, it was simply the result of preparation, patience, and trust in Silver. Every twist, turn, and step had been carefully executed, and the horse responded instantly, perfectly attuned to its rider. The small group at the front was now controlled, and the rest of the crowd began to mirror their movements, following the gentle guidance rather than pushing against it. Hale knew that his role was far from over. Even as the crowd calmed, vigilance was necessary. He remained alert, scanning every movement, listening to every shout, watching for any sudden change in energy. Silver remained tense but controlled, responding to the smallest shift in Hale's posture. Together, they moved through the plaza, a single unified presence that commanded attention and respect. What had begun as a potentially dangerous surge had transformed into an extraordinary display of skill, courage, and discipline. The protesters, though still passionate, were now moving safely, guided by the authority of Hale and Silver. Onlookers whispered in awe, capturing the moment on their phones, their faces reflecting admiration for the calm yet commanding presence in the heart of the plaza. The afternoon, once threatening to spiral into chaos, had been turned into a remarkable demonstration of horsemanship and human skill. As the moments passed, Hale felt a quiet satisfaction. He had maintained order without aggression, guided the crowd safely, and prevented potential injuries. Silver shifted beneath him, muscles relaxing slightly now that the most intense surge had passed. The crowd, while still energetic, had been calmed, the front lines stabilized, and the situation under control. It was a rare and remarkable achievement, the kind that would be remembered by those who had witnessed it. The afternoon was far from over, but for now the immediate challenge had been met. Hale and Silver had proven that courage, skill, and patience could accomplish what force alone could not. The crowd's energy remained, but it was now focused, controlled, and safe. The scene, once tense and potentially dangerous, had been transformed into a living lesson in calm authority and extraordinary horsemanship. As the afternoon wore on, the energy of the plaza began to change. The initial surge of the crowd had been controlled, and the wave of chaos that had threatened to erupt had been tamed, thanks to Sergeant Thomas Hale and his horse, Silver. But while the immediate danger had passed, the aftermath brought a new set of challenges and reflections. The crowd, though calmer, remained energized. Some people whispered among themselves, recounting what they had just witnessed, while others pointed at Silver and Hale, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. The atmosphere was no longer tense with fear, but charged with admiration and curiosity. Hale remained atop Silver, alert and observant. He knew that even though the surge had been managed, the situation was not over. Crowds could shift quickly, and emotions, once stirred, were not easily contained. He guided Silver slowly through the front lines, ensuring that protesters who had surged forward were safely integrated back into the larger group. His movements were calm, deliberate, and precise. Every step was calculated to maintain order while respecting the people's right to demonstrate. The subtle guidance he provided through Silver's presence kept the crowd from fragmenting into smaller, potentially dangerous groups. Journalists moved closer, cameras clicking, capturing the calm authority Hale displayed. Reporters whispered excitedly to one another, recognizing that what they were witnessing was extraordinary. Social media users nearby filmed the interaction, their posts already trending with phrases like unbelievable horsemanship and Royal Guard hero. The attention was overwhelming, yet Hale did not waver. He understood that the public was watching, but he focused on the task at hand, maintaining safety and ensuring the protesters' voices could be expressed without danger. The protesters, now calmer, began to talk among themselves. Some were still upset, frustrated by the lack of immediate response from the authorities. Others, however, were quietly reflecting on what had just occurred. A group of young students exchanged looks of amazement, whispering about the horse and rider who had managed to control a surge that could have been dangerous. Parents reassured their children, pointing out Hale and Silver as examples of calm strength. Even those who had been pushing forward earlier seemed to pause, recognizing the skill and authority that had guided them back safely. Nearby, the Royal Guards adjusted their positions, maintaining the perimeter and ensuring no one attempted to breach the palace gates again. Each guard worked seamlessly with the others, their discipline apparent in every movement. Hale observed them with a quiet satisfaction. They had trained for hours, days, and years to respond to situations like this, but training alone was not enough. It required courage, presence of mind, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. Hale and Silver had demonstrated all of these qualities in the most challenging circumstances. Despite the calm that was returning, Hale noticed subtle signs of tension among some of the protesters. A few individuals were still restless, trying to regroup or push forward again. He shifted slightly in the saddle, signaling Silver to move closer, creating a subtle barrier that reminded the crowd of the rules of engagement. Silver responded instantly, moving with grace and authority, its presence alone enough to prevent further surges. Hale's reputation, combined with the horse's majestic poise, created an environment where discipline was enforced without aggression. The impact of the afternoon's events began to ripple beyond the plaza. Nearby shops and cafes were buzzing with conversations about what had happened. People who had only heard about the protest now shared stories of the horse and rider who had managed the crowd with calm authority. News crews arrived, eager to interview witnesses, capturing first-hand accounts of the remarkable display. Hale remained focused, aware that while public attention was high, his primary responsibility was still the safety of the crowd and the integrity of the Royal Guard's duty. Among the protesters, reactions varied widely. Some expressed genuine admiration for Hale's actions, acknowledging that without his skill and Silver's training, the situation could have escalated dangerously. Others remained frustrated, not with the management of the crowd, but with the issues that had brought them to the plaza in the first place. Hale observed all of this without judgment, understanding that his role was not to solve societal problems, but to maintain safety and order in the immediate moment. His actions had prevented harm, and that alone was a significant accomplishment. As the afternoon continued, the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the plaza. The warmth of the sunlight softened, and a cooler breeze moved through the crowd, carrying with it the sounds of quiet conversations and reflective murmurs. Hale guided Silver slowly along the perimeter, ensuring that any remaining pockets of tension were gently managed. Each movement was deliberate, each action designed to maintain calm and order without confrontation. The combination of experience, preparation, and trust between rider and horse continued to be the defining element of the afternoon. Witnesses continued to share their reactions. One young woman whispered to her friend, "I can't believe how calm he is. It's like the horse knows exactly what to do." Another man nodded, adding, "It's not just the horse, it's him. He's in complete control, and yet it's not scary. It's inspiring." Hale heard these comments but did not respond. He remained focused, knowing that observation and careful guidance were more effective than acknowledgement or applause in this moment. The royal guards maintained their positions, ensuring that the crowd could disperse safely when the time came. Hale continued to guide Silver, using subtle shifts and gentle cues to manage the flow of people. The horse's movements were precise, weaving through the crowd, separating individuals when necessary, and creating pathways for safe movement. The skill displayed was not flashy or dramatic, but it was highly effective. Every observer could see that discipline and calm authority could achieve far more than shouting or force ever could. As the hours passed, the mood of the crowd began to shift from tense to reflective. People who had arrived angry or anxious were now talking to each other, sharing their experiences and perspectives. The energy in the plaza became less about confrontation and more about discussion. Hale noticed this change and allowed Silver to slow, easing the presence of authority without diminishing it. The balance between control and freedom was delicate, and Hale handled it with careful attention, ensuring that the protest remained peaceful while allowing individuals to express themselves. The consequences of the afternoon were already beginning to take shape beyond the plaza. Social media posts circulated rapidly, sharing videos and photos of Hale and Silver in action. News reports praised the Royal Guards for their professionalism and the remarkable skill of Sergeant Hale. Citizens discussed the events in cafes, homes, and workplaces, highlighting the unique combination of courage, discipline, and horsemanship that had prevented potential chaos. Hale remained modest about the attention, focusing instead on the ongoing safety and order in the area. Within the crowd, some protesters approached the guards cautiously, asking questions and seeking clarification. Hale responded politely, using calm words and gestures to explain the rules and ensure understanding. The presence of Silver helped communicate authority without fear. People listened, respected the guidance, and followed instructions without hesitation. The combination of verbal communication and subtle physical guidance created an environment where compliance was achieved through respect rather than intimidation. By the late afternoon, the crowd had begun to thin. Groups of protesters started to disperse, some returning home, others moving on to planned meetings or discussions. The mood remained respectful, and there were no incidents of aggression or disorder. Hale guided Silver carefully, ensuring that pathways were clear and that everyone could leave safely. Even as the number of people decreased, he maintained vigilance, aware that sudden movements or distractions could reignite tension. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the plaza, Hale reflected quietly on the events of the afternoon. He felt a mixture of relief and pride. The surge had been managed, the crowd had been kept safe, and no one had been harmed. His training, experience, and the bond he shared with Silver had made all the difference. The horse, sensing the change in mood, relaxed slightly beneath him, still alert but no longer tense. It was a moment of calm after a long and challenging day. Hale's actions that afternoon left a lasting impression on everyone present. The display of skill and calm authority demonstrated that challenges, no matter how intense, could be met with patience, preparation, and courage. Silver's grace and responsiveness, combined with Hale's knowledge and experience, created a memorable example of what true mastery could achieve. People would recount the events for days, weeks, and even years, not just for the excitement, but for the lessons in discipline, leadership, and composure. The plaza gradually emptied, leaving behind only the echoes of the afternoon's events. Hale guided Silver slowly back to the stables, taking time to ensure the horse was comfortable and calm after such an intense display of strength and skill. The royal guards began to pack up, exchanging quiet words of respect and acknowledgement for one another's efforts. The city, now settling into evening, seemed calmer, more reflective, and in some ways inspired by what had just unfolded in its center. Even as the immediate events ended, the consequences of the afternoon would continue to unfold. Videos and stories spread quickly, shaping public perception and demonstrating the power of calm authority in moments of potential chaos. The protesters, though still concerned about their cause, had experienced firsthand the importance of order and safety. Hale and Silver's actions had shown that courage, discipline, and skill could prevent danger while allowing people to be heard. As the evening approached, the city seemed to settle into a quiet rhythm, the chaos of the afternoon gradually fading into memory. The plaza, once filled with the sounds of shouting and movement, now echoed only with soft footsteps and distant voices. People were leaving, some still talking about what they had witnessed, while others paused to reflect on the extraordinary scene they had just experienced. Sergeant Thomas Hale and his horse, Silver, had become the center of attention, though Hale himself remained calm and composed, focused on guiding the remaining crowd safely and ensuring that no incident occurred before the day concluded. Even as the crowd thinned, the impact of the afternoon was palpable. Children tugged at their parents' hands, pointing excitedly at Silver and whispering about the horse's elegance and power. Teenagers recorded videos on their phones, replaying the moments when Hale had guided the surging protesters with such precision and control. Elderly onlookers shook their heads in disbelief, remarking to one another about the skill, patience, and courage it had taken to manage such a tense situation. The admiration was everywhere, and yet Hale remained silent, allowing his actions to speak louder than words ever could. Hale guided Silver through the plaza slowly, careful to maintain a sense of calm and order until the very last people had left. He moved with deliberate attention, ensuring that pathways were clear and that no one was left behind. His presence, calm and authoritative, created a final layer of reassurance for anyone lingering in the area. The horse, sensing the easing tension, moved gracefully, responding to the smallest of Hale's signals. Together, they had turned what could have been a dangerous, chaotic afternoon into a controlled, safe, and even inspiring event. News crews and journalists were still present, capturing footage of the plaza as the crowd dispersed. Reporters approached a few witnesses to gather statements, and the stories began to spread rapidly across television, radio, and social media. People shared videos of Hale and Silver navigating the crowd with a level of skill that seemed almost unbelievable. The messages were clear. Courage, discipline, and mastery could prevent danger, even in moments where tension and energy were high. The story of the Royal Guard and his horse quickly went beyond the city, drawing attention from people in other towns and even from those following the news from distant regions. For Hale, however, the attention was not the goal. He had no desire for praise or recognition. His focus had always been on duty, on protecting the people and ensuring safety. The moment he had been trained for, one in which patience, experience, and horsemanship could prevent chaos, had arrived, and he had acted. He knew that without Silver's responsiveness and training, the situation could have been far more dangerous. The trust and bond between horse and rider had been essential, a silent partnership that had guided the crowd safely through the surge. As the last of the protesters left the plaza, Hale reflected on the lessons of the day. He thought about the energy that had built up in the crowd, the determination and passion of the people, and the delicate balance that had been required to maintain order without aggression. It was a reminder that true authority was not about dominance or fear, but about skill, patience, and respect. Silver, sensing the conclusion of their task, slowed its steps, ears twitching as if acknowledging the shared accomplishment. Hale patted the horse gently, a silent word of gratitude for the support and trust that had been crucial in every movement and decision. People continued to talk about the afternoon well after the events ended. Witnesses described Hale's movements and Silver's responsiveness as if recounting a story from legend. Children shared the tale with their friends, replaying the moments in vivid detail. Parents discussed the importance of calm authority and discipline, using Hale and Silver as examples for teaching patience and responsibility. Even some of the protesters themselves acknowledged the effectiveness of the guidance, expressing respect for the skill and courage that had prevented harm. The story had become a shared memory, one that would inspire and influence long after the plaza emptied. In the Royal Guard barracks, Hale was met with quiet respect from his fellow officers. They discussed the afternoon's events with measured admiration, praising the precision, calm, and quick thinking that had been displayed. Yet Hale remained humble, reminding his colleagues that the success of the operation was not a solo achievement. Silver had been an essential partner, and the coordination of the Royal Guards as a whole had ensured that safety was maintained. It was a reminder that every action, no matter how individual it seemed, relied on teamwork, preparation, and trust. The impact of the afternoon also reached the wider community. Local news outlets ran feature stories, highlighting Hale's horsemanship and the careful management of the crowd. Social media users posted video clips, discussing the importance of discipline, courage, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Educators shared the story with students, emphasizing lessons in leadership, responsibility, and problem-solving. For many, the events of the day became more than just a news story. They were a lesson in how skill, patience, and respect could turn a potentially dangerous situation into one of safety and admiration. As the evening continued, Hale took Silver back to the stables, checking the horse carefully for signs of fatigue or stress. He groomed Silver with meticulous care, brushing the horse's coat until it shone in the fading light. Hale spoke softly to Silver, expressing gratitude and reassurance, reinforcing the bond that had been vital throughout the afternoon. The quiet moment between horse and rider was a contrast to the chaos earlier in the day, a reminder that even in moments of tension, calm and care were essential for success. Hale thought about the people he had guided that afternoon, the children, the students, the parents, and even the more assertive protesters. Each person had a story, a reason for being there, and a voice that deserved to be heard. His role had been to create a safe environment in which those voices could be expressed without risk of harm. It was a responsibility he took seriously, understanding that the value of life and safety outweighed any personal recognition or attention. The lessons of discipline, patience, and courage extended beyond the plaza. They applied to every aspect of life, in ways both seen and unseen. As night fell over the city, Hale reflected on the legacy of the day. He thought about how one afternoon, through skill, patience, and trust, a potentially dangerous situation had been transformed into an inspiring example of calm authority. The story of Hale and Silver would be remembered not just for the drama of the moment, but for the lessons it carried: courage without aggression, discipline without cruelty, and mastery without arrogance. It was a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, it was possible to act with integrity, skill, and respect for all involved. The city slowly returned to its evening rhythm. Streetlights illuminated the empty plaza, casting long shadows across the cobblestones where the crowd had once surged. Hale and Silver stood in the quiet of the stables, a sense of satisfaction settling over them both. The partnership that had guided the events of the afternoon was stronger than ever, a testament to trust, training, and experience. The lessons learned would influence future operations, teaching new members of the Royal Guards the importance of calm authority and skillful guidance. In the days and weeks that followed, the story of the afternoon became part of the city's collective memory. Videos and images were shared, inspiring young and old alike. Teachers used the events as examples in lessons about leadership, responsibility, and conflict management. Parents told their children about the importance of patience and skill. Even the protesters who had been present reflected on the afternoon with respect, recognizing the careful balance of guidance and authority that had prevented harm while allowing them to express their concerns. Hale's role, while central, was part of a larger story of teamwork, preparation, and trust. The Royal Guards, trained in discipline and strategy, had executed their duties flawlessly, ensuring that every action contributed to safety and order. Silver's responsiveness, intelligence, and grace had been essential, proving that the bond between horse and rider was more than a partnership. It was a form of communication that transcended words, guiding both the crowd and the officer through moments of uncertainty with precision and care. By the end of the evening, Hale understood that the true measure of success was not recognition or applause, but the knowledge that lives had been kept safe and order maintained. The lessons of the afternoon would resonate for years to come. Courage and skill, when combined with patience and respect, could achieve results far beyond what raw force or authority alone could accomplish. Silver's calm presence, Hale's strategic thinking, and the disciplined support of the Royal Guards had created an unforgettable example of what could be achieved when preparation, trust, and integrity met opportunity. The story of that unforgettable afternoon would be told and retold, a lasting reminder of what calm, skillful, and respectful action could accomplish. Children would point at horses and imagine themselves As heroes, young students would discuss discipline and leadership, and adults would recall the importance of patience and strategy in the face of tension. Hale and Silver had not only preserved safety, they had inspired a city, teaching that true mastery and courage were expressed through calm authority, careful preparation, and trust in those you rely on. As Hale finally secured Silver in the stables and prepared to leave, he paused for a moment to look back at the empty plaza. The golden glow of the streetlights reflected softly off the cobblestones, and the memory of the crowd's energy lingered in the air. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of quiet pride and accomplishment. The day had been challenging, intense, and extraordinary, yet it had ended safely and successfully. Hale knew that while the city would remember the events, the lessons of patience, courage, and calm authority would remain with him and Silver forever, guiding them in every future challenge they might face together.